Welcome all to one more speaker series from the Institute for Ethics in AI at TU Munich. My name is Christoph Rüttke. I'm a professor of business ethics here, and I'm the director of the Institute for Ethics in AI. With our speaker series, we invite experts from all over the world to talk about ethics and governance of AI. These events serve as an important platform for us for sharing new research and exchanging knowledge. Since our launch in 2019, we were already able to run 36 speaker series events with distinguished guests from all over the world. And today's topic is the why of AI ethics, AI and agency. And we have the pleasure of having Professor Emma Ruttkamp-Bloem with us. She is a professor of science and technology, an AI ethics policy advisor, and a machine ethics researcher. Emma is a member, in particular, I would like to highlight that, of the newly convened UN Secretary General's AI Advisory Body. She's also the current chairperson of the UNESCO World Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology, and she's also the South Africa representative for the Responsible AI Network Africa, which was co-founded with our institute. Currently, she's the head of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Pretoria. She leads the AI ethics group at the South African Center for AI Research and chairs the Southern African Conference on AI Research. So we will start with a presentation, and afterwards we will have the opportunity to hear your questions and comments. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. So without further ado, Emma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Christoph. Let me just quickly share my screen. And please tell me if it is fine.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, good. Okay. So I think that there is a lot of talk at the moment about, or there's been a lot of talk over the past few years about the what versus the how of AI ethics. But I think that we are losing the core of AI ethics and the purpose of AI ethics if we neglect the why of AI ethics. And this is what I'm going to be talking about. Quick outline. I will talk about the why of AI ethics by referring to what I call the right to mental integrity, which I'll explain to you. I'll say a few things about the current bad name that AI ethics has, and I'll say what I think it is not and what it is. Then I'll give you an argument for positive, or what I call human AI ethics. And I'm going to lean on notions around agency, as I balance two views of liberty, capability approach. And then I'll say something about the connection between AI ethics and AI governance, and AI ethics and sustainable AI innovation. And then I'll conclude by recapping why AI ethics in fact does matter, and say a few words on the changed role of governments when we have any kind of conversation around AI policymaking or AI governance, or talk about AI ethics. I really would appreciate, I just quickly want to say this before I start, I really would appreciate your feedback. This is something that I've been working on for a while, but I don't get enough time to sit with it. I'm looking to write it up at some point, so please feel free. And I don't think I'm going to use all the time that I have. One always says that, and then famously one goes over time, but I'm going to try to be as fast as I can so that we can have a discussion. So first, a warning. Technology has greater control than it has ever had over outcomes related to who people become, what people can or may do, what people can achieve, and how people can interact with the world. And this warning comes from Morley in the article that she wrote with some of her colleagues, specifically on the how of AI ethics. So who people become, what people can or may do, what people can achieve, and how people can interact with the world. Because these aspects of being human are impacted on by AI technology, civil society must become aware and have some kind of basic understanding of the potential of some AI technologies to threaten fundamental freedoms. And I'm going to talk about a particular fundamental freedom that I think we don't pay enough attention to in this context of AI technology. And of course, here is the disclaimer is, of course, that AI technology is a wonderful technology. It can indeed change the world for the better. The problem is simply that there are lots of factors and entities at play that might ensure that it does not fulfill the full benefit, the promise of benefit that it has for humanity. And this is the reason why we have these kinds of discussions. So the right not to be manipulated, the right to be who you are. If we look in a mirror, and the mirror test is one of the first tests for self-consciousness, self-awareness, intuitively from a very young age, we know who that person in the mirror is. We know who we are. We know what we like. We know what would make us happy, what would make us anxious. And a lot of that happens intuitively. Somehow, in our inner world, if we think back to thinkers like Descartes and Hume. So core to being human is this set of assumptions on how humans would expect themselves to react in certain situations. There is a set of conditions that I know of, only me, that work together to make me me. And I know how I expect myself to react in certain situations. Sometimes I surprise myself, but I can usually still in some way find a reason for even that kind of surprise. So we are in constant conversations with ourselves right through our lives, and the set of assumptions that kind of direct this conversation that we have with ourselves change throughout our lives, but we know that it is our set of assumptions. We know it belongs to us, and we know that we trust it for that reason. It is also something that ensures that achieving a life of well-being, tailored to each human's own objectives and expectations, given their personality, their circumstances, their abilities, remains a realizable individual goal. So it is something that one can look forward to be able to attain a life of value in some way on one's own terms, for one's own reasons. But AI technology has the potential to compromise this natural course of things, as it has the potential to alter the basic information on which humans base their interaction, this set of assumptions, and also the very way in which this interaction happens. It has the potential to change the way in which we find ourselves thrown into the world, if we borrow a little bit from Heidegger's existential philosophy, and how we react to the way in which we are thrown into the world. But all technology does this in some way, doesn't it? If we think of the post-phenomenologist, if we think even of someone like Andy Clark and notions around the extended mind, surely we always in some way are co-formed by technology in some way in our bid to create a life world in which we live our lives and we use technology to mediate those lives. But in the case of AI technology, there is something specific that we have to take into account. And that is the fact that it is everywhere. The pervasiveness, the perniciousness, the fact that it's a keystone technology. So it is in many cases at the center of many other kinds of technology, such as the Internet of Things. And people, it is subtle. Its influence is subtle. So it has certain aspects, and we can talk about that, in question time. Maybe we are over dramatizing some of these aspects. I don't think so, but let's have a conversation about that. But it is different from other technologies because it is everywhere, and because it's not always evident how it is everywhere. So it is the right thing to do, I think. It's an ethical kind of appeal to think about how AI impacts our ability to be the persons that we are. And to give you a bit of argument for why I say this, I remind you that the adoption of the United Declaration of Human Rights recognized human rights to be the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace. But in the age of AI, I argue that the potential attainment of freedom, justice, and peace is directly proportional to being free from manipulation. And here I specifically mean manipulation that happens through AI systems in some way. AI technology confronts us with the potential for a new kind of indoctrination, slavery, and erosion of self-will and self-determination, which imperils an individual human's ability to authentically self-determine, to actualize their personal identity, to actualize their agency autonomously, to build or achieve an authentic life of well-being, and to attain freedom, justice, and peace. So if we are in some way influenced to think differently from how we would have thought intuitively, or given our situation, or whatever the case might be, we are not acting in authentic ways. So if we consider the United Declaration of Human Rights, there are 3 articles that come into one's mind if one thinks about self-determination. Article 18 speaks of the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. And this right includes freedom to change one's religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest this religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Article 19 comes close to what I'm talking about, but I think we need a little bit more. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression according to this article. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. To some extent, it speaks to what I'm talking about being free from manipulation in terms of self-determining, but it is also in terms of the process of coming to hold opinions that we need to be free from interference. Article 20 then speaks, obviously, of the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. But I feel that we need something more. We need a more clear focus on the right to self-identity and what this would entail. So I refer to this as the right to mental integrity. And it's more than the right to freedom of thought. It's more than the right to freedom of opinion and expression and association. So the core of this talk is this question: what is needed for citizens to realize such a right in the era of living with AI technology? And for me, this is the core question of AI ethics. This is the why of AI ethics. The answer lies somewhere in building a society in which humans are able to determine what living a dignified life, which would include freedom, justice, and peace, would mean on their own terms. And establishing such a society, for me, is the core duty or the core role of AI ethics. I will set out my argument by leaning, as I said before, on capability theory and also on Esaias notions of liberty and certain notions of self-determination and agency. And so dignity would be interpreted in terms of the capability theory, but I will say a lot about that in what follows. So 1 minute to spend on Aristotle. If I can, I don't know what it is, but Aristotle always in some way pops up in what I do, whether it's philosophy of science or philosophy of technology. So we know that Aristotle taught that humans can only flourish as members of a society, but of a society of the right kind, a society that encourages a virtuous life, that creates the right kind of environment for us to pursue a life of virtue. So my focus is not so much on a virtuous life, because we can talk about that, what that would mean perhaps for a very long time, but on a flourishing life, a dignified life based on one's own decisions, a life in which one is free to reason in one's own way for one's own reasons. And so while my focus is on this flourishing life, I do agree with Aristotle on the role of society. I will argue that we need the whole of society, and here interpreted in terms of all AI actors, which in fact is all of society, because these are the researchers, the designers, the developers, the deployers, the users, and even those involved in end-of-use processes of AI technology. And we need all of these role players to ensure an environment conducive to a life of dignity based on notions of autonomy, self-determination, positive liberty, and agency. But before I unpack this argument in a little bit more detail, I'm going to say a few words about AI ethics. So why should we care about AI ethics? There are arguments that are happy arguments or reasons, and there are bad reasons why we should care, and there are ugly reasons why we should care. So the good obviously has to do with the potential for benefit that AI technology brings. But the bad has to do with the fact that we can only ensure the realization of this benefit if we take certain concerns seriously and control these concerns in particular ways. And these relate, as you all know, to amplification of inequality, to threats to social justice and political stability, the quality of information, and so on. The ugly argument is a whole different conversation in a sense, and one that I also think is totally underplayed in AI governance conversations, but we can't say too much about that now, but that relates to the business model of commodification of individual persons' data for profit, and also for reasons to do with geopolitical power play. But right, let's focus on AI ethics. So let's try and focus on the good and bad parts of what I've just said, why AI ethics matters. Who gives it a bad name? The what of AI ethics gives it a bad name, and to some extent, the how of AI ethics gives it a bad name. So at the moment, Algorithm Watch has identified 167 different kinds of guidelines. Very few include directives on enforcement, oversight, and compliance. Most of them are ineffective, and we had an explosion of articles on this around 2019, 2020, from Hagendorf, for instance, from Mittelstadt and others, Jobin et al., and so on. So there's a lot of the research that went into proving that this is the case and considering why this is the case. And interestingly, or not, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, but interestingly, almost all of these guidelines come from the North. The reason for the ineffectiveness lies somewhere among the lack of distributed responsibility, the over-focus on lofty ideas that come from the tech community, and I think this is one of Hagendorf's points, and the lack of feeling of moral accountability on the side of the tech community. They are simply not trained and might even not be interested because they are members of the tech community, in wondering what the long-term social or political or economic or even moral consequences would be of the technology that they are working with. And this is not their fault. It is just how things work. But so they need help in some way. There's a notable exclusion from these guidelines, two that at least that I want to note as exceptions: the OECD AI principles from 2019 and the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI 2021. These do not really fit this picture, and you're welcome to ask me afterwards why I say this. In terms of the how, there was this call to stop focusing on the values and principles and to start saying how we have to translate these into action, so that in fact we do have the kind of constraint that we are calling for. And so the move was to move towards technical tools that would enable testing for compliance, developing libraries, tools, mechanisms, methods, methodologies, practices to ensure responsible and ethical AI. There are tools for diversity and inclusion and stress tests for determining how well a system is doing with sensitive data. There are tools for detecting bias. There are mechanisms for controlling transparency and explainability. There are mechanisms and methodologies to check the quality of data, libraries, tools, and so on for checking robustness of software, lots of different impact assessment tools. But all of these methods that we have for the how of AI ethics need information on what is fairness, what is bias, structural bias, when would we satisfy demands for explainability, what is it that every stakeholder in the process of AI needs to feel that they do understand and that there is transparency about how decisions have been taken that influence their lives directly in some way. And that is the weakness of this kind of approach in isolation. Oh, sorry, and there's value by design, obviously. Okay, then on top of this, there is this recent explosion in terms of AI governance. Obviously in the EU, as you would all know much better than I do, in China, Canada, the G7 Principles and Code of Conduct, the US Executive Order, the Bletchley Declaration, and the Council of Europe's very recent Convention on AI, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law, which I think is really important. And then the very, very recent UN General Assembly resolution on artificial intelligence, as well as the Digital Compact, which will be hopefully adopted at the Summit of the Future in September. And then lots of very interesting movements in the Global South. But in all of these, in the midst of all of these debates about these kinds of developments in terms of governance, there is this, I'm not sure what to call it, this conversation about the role for human rights and the role for AI ethics. I don't want to say versus, but there is this tension between AI ethics and human rights, and I want to say something about that before I go to my argument. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides us with a guiding framework that's universally agreed upon, and that results in legally binding rules. Ethics, on the other hand, is a matter of subjective preference, widely disputed, and only as strong as the goodwill that supports it. Okay, this is a really negative picture of ethics, but let's go with it. I think there is a different portrayal or a different perspective on the different roles of human rights and ethics. And I want to try and convince you through what I'm going to say in the next few minutes that AI ethics in fact prevents human rights violation and enables upholding international human rights standards and principles. It's very far from an obstacle. It's very far from being in competition. It is in fact an enabler. But we'll see if I can make this point well enough or not. So quickly, what AI ethics is not. It's not a purely normative ethics. It's in fact an applied normative and meta ethics. And please ask me about this if you want it in question time. It's not a top-down set of rules and guidelines, an abstract set that just comes from somewhere. It has to do with bottom-up reasoning. It's not in competition with international law. It's a dynamic system of values based on reasoned argument, and international law is the bottom line of those arguments. It is not an obstacle to governance and innovation. It's an enabler of governance and innovation. It's not a technical issue. It's a human issue. So if we now come to the why of AI ethics in a little bit more detail, how do we argue in favor of AI ethics as a human ethics? How do we build a society in which humans can authentically attain lives of well-being? If we start thinking about this, and we want to think back now about what I said about the right to mental integrity. Were humans ever really making decisions independently? I mean, through the ages, people have somehow allied other entities to make decisions for them, or they've been forced to do so in many cases for different reasons. Now, I want to make 2 points. The point is that I want to get across is that humans have the right to decide who and what they allow into their decision making, if anybody. So if you do want to decide other entities to influence your decision making about your life, then it is your decision and it's for your reasons that you do this. It is not that you somehow are manipulated in ways that you are not completely aware of to do this, or then to think in a particular way. And these decisions then will pertain to what living a dignified life would mean to these people who allow other people to into their decision making, and how to attain this dignified life. But what does this mean in an era of living with AI technology? How do we ensure that humans live lives of dignity, or that they flourish in tandem with AI technology? And my argument is, or the building blocks of my argument are freedom from manipulation, certain tools that we need in the guise of capabilities, and we need society to be to have a particular nature. So we know that there are many examples of agency erosion and AI in the different sectors in terms of social robots, AI in the military, education, finance, healthcare, self-tracking technologies, and the choice environment, surveillance, social scoring. It's everywhere. And there are lots of human rights violations related to agency that come from AI technology, like fair trial and due process, effective remedy, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, association, the right to free elections, and this year it will be so incredibly interesting across the world, the right to freedom of thought, prohibition of discrimination, social rights and access to public services, and then I want to add the right to mental integrity. So if I now start unpacking my argument, brief reminder on what Acai Lyn's 2 concepts of liberty are about. Negative liberty is more in the context of individuals, and it relates to the absence of obstacles or barriers or constraints or any kind of interference from others external to an individual agent. So one is free if no one is stopping one from doing whatever one might want to do. Positive liberty is usually understood more in terms of collectivities, society, for instance. And this is not about the absence of obstacles, but it is about the presence of control, of self-mastery, self-determination, self-realization on the part of the agent So to be free, one must be self-determined. One must be able to control one's own destiny in one's own interests and work around certain constraints one finds in society. So if we're then keeping this in the back of our minds, think about autonomy and agency, at issue here is not only combating the absence of meaningful options, so establishing negative liberty, but rather ensuring the authenticity and rationality of one's deliberative processes, positive liberty. In this sense, autonomy in the fullest sense entails that individuals choose to act freely to maximize their well-being on the basis of reasons they can understand and endorse without manipulation, such that their agency allows them to actualize their positive liberty in authentic ways. And what is it that they need to do this? They need access to certain capabilities. They need access to certain services and processes in society in order to achieve lives that they can value. So capabilities align with agency in enabling individuals to make reasoned choices and act accordingly, which again obviously reminds of Aristotle also, while autonomy in this context, according to Sen, implies an adequate level of competence, implying that individuals use opportunities to maximize their freedom of decision and action. So they can use these opportunities, but they have these opportunities to maximize their freedom of decision and action, and that is what is important. So the intuition that grounds capabilities is the intuition of a dignified human life, whereby people have the capability to pursue their conception of the good in cooperation with others. So in this sense, the capability X entails having the real possibility for X, which depends on a person's rational, independent powers and no external circumstances preventing them from X. Capabilities are a combination of processes, tools, skills, behaviors, and organization that enables humans to live lives of meaning and value. And here are examples of the capabilities that Nussbaum identified, and I will give you examples of the kind of capabilities that I'm thinking of in a minute or so. So in every society then, in this context of the capability approach, each person has an entitlement to all possible combinations of capabilities they need and that they have access to. And this entitlement for Nussbaum is a political entitlement that imposes duties on governments. But if we want to ask what kind of entitlements will enable and allow humans the agency and autonomy to achieve dignified, autonomously chosen lives of well-being in tandem with AI technology, we bump into AI ethics. So in the context of AI ethics, values and principles are ethical entitlements that place duties not only on governments, but on all AI actors, on the researchers, the designers, the developers, the deployers, the users, and those involved in end of use. So in each stage of the AI system lifecycle, every AI actor has to ensure an environment in which individuals can flourish and build dignified lives in tandem with AI technology. And this would be an environment in which human rights are respected. So capabilities in this sense then simply are privacy, data protection, transparency and explainability, responsibility and accountability, safety and robustness, AI literacy, multi-stakeholder collaboration. So what is it that I'm saying? AI actors have duties imposed on them through ethical entitlements of citizens to achieve lives that they value, not negative duties, which again is about the absence, no action, no harm, no blocking of autonomous agency, and so on, but positive duties in terms of action, protecting vulnerabilities and helping to satisfy needs, aiding and supporting agency and rational thinking. AI ethics then becomes an interpreting tool of what positive liberty in the full sense of the word entails in the context of AI and agency. And therefore, AI ethics becomes the realizing mechanism of positive liberty, and that's positive AI ethics. So the positive argument for AI ethics then is about ensuring the authenticity and rationality of one's deliberative processes by the translation of ethical values and principles into positive duties that will actively prevent harm and support human agency and autonomy. Let me give you an example. AI ethics translates and actualizes human entitlements, for instance, the right to privacy. In terms of positive actions for AI actors, draw up a consent letter, ensure responsible third-party sharing, regulate access to data, and so on, such that each individual is able to realize their agency, positive liberty, to decide whether or not to sign a consent letter for their own reasons in a dignified and autonomous manner. In this way, AI ethics controls or guides the potential of AI processes to enhance human flourishing in authentic ways. In conclusion, the socio-technical arrangements of our societies ought to be such that they strengthen authentic human agency and enable humans to live dignified lives that they value. And this is the core task of AI ethics, to ensure this arrangement in our societies. AI values and principles as ethical entitlement should empower humans to autonomously build lives of meaning in their interaction with AI technology. This can be achieved if AI ethics is a positive ethics that safeguards, ensures, and actualizes agency as the right to positive liberty, as well as autonomy in terms of an ecosystem or society in which AI actors take up their positive duties to create the means and environment for individuals to authentically realize this liberty. So why AI ethics? 3 reasons. First, why AI ethics and the why of AI ethics, okay? Why does it matter? The advent of data-driven AI technology and its underlying business model threaten the ability of governments to fulfill their ultimate duties to their citizens. And this is very often in policy conversations, the elephant in the room, because the world works around the national sovereignty of states. But if governments can't do what they are supposed to do, what happens? So in my view, governments are not the sole entities responsible for ensuring that humans can attain lives they value in the era of AI, or AI actors acting on duties imposed on them by AI ethics principles, in fact, are responsible to do this. Second reason, AI ethics is an enabler of AI governance, of international law. It is not a competitor, it is not an add-on. It is an integral consideration of what is needed to ensure achievement of a life of well-being right through the AI life cycle. It is about flagging what is needed. It ensures that human rights violations are prevented through placing positive duties on all AI actors to empower humans to live lives of well-being. In the last place, it is the ear to the ground. It has its ear to the ground in ways that human rights law, standards, and principles do not. It ensures that society is such that humans can live authentic, dignified lives. It provides a strategy to unpack and exploit the social value of technologies. It provides a solution for risk management as it allows us to anticipate and avoid costly mistakes. So final thoughts. The core assumption of this talk is that a life of well-being in the era of AI implies a life free from mental manipulation. Why is this conversation on mental integrity needed? Well, current and future levels of manipulation in terms of decisions generated by AI systems are concerning, to say the least. I just give you one quote. The pervasiveness of artificial content gives credibility to all those who want to divide reality. The more we distrust the evidence before our eyes, the greater the power of liars to say what is and isn't true. The possibility for manipulation and deception is infinite. How to ensure a life free from mental manipulation? We ensure the authenticity and rationality of one's deliberative processes, as I've said over and over again, and one ensures the kind of society in which one can realize this liberty in terms of capability theory and in terms of human rights law, standards, and principles. And this means acknowledging the need for human AI ethics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma, for this fascinating talk. And I hand over for the moderation of Q&A to Caitlin.
And thank you, Emma. There was a lot in there. So I hope, please everyone submit your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to speak. And we'll get started. And Christoph, please feel free to jump in with some questions or comments too. I mean, I guess one thing that I first wanted to start with was you center a lot of this around the idea of liberty, self-determination, right to just decide and be free from manipulation. If we go then into kind of the answers to this or the solutions to this is things, and I suspect the answer is no, are principles like transparency and explainability enough to give people access to this right to decide, or what kind of tangible kind of tools do you think are needed there to enable this?
Okay, so I think it's about cascading down in terms of abstraction. So what is needed is to not just talk about transparency, explainability, or the like. What is needed is to understand that one has to fulfill these principles or actualize these principles in ways that would not take away the agency of humans in any way. And how one does that then is to try and unpack them in terms of positive actions, in terms of, okay, what would it mean to make concrete the right to privacy in a way that would not compromise my agency? So it's one thing to say, here's the consent letter, sign it, because everybody has to sign it, because it's for your own good, because this is what, otherwise you can't bank here. Those are reasons that we don't want. Those are ways we are being manipulated into buying into this technology in ways that we wouldn't necessarily want to. But if we are told, okay, here are the reasons, use your own rational ability to decide, and your positive liberty to decide, actualize it, decide how will it add value to your life to sign this consent letter. So I think it's a you know, all the time while I'm thinking about this, every few minutes or every few hours there is, I think, okay, you know what, everybody knows this, but then I think there is this subtle difference of emphasis on a different perspective on what human-centeredness means. So always allowing humans to do what they think would be best for them. And look, we don't know what is best for us. Look at the world. It's a complete and utter disaster. But we still have the right to make messes. And we still have the right to trial and error without in some way being manipulated by an external entity. And I think that's the bottom line. So even positive duties would have to be then unpacked in terms of more concrete building blocks. And so my example is still not concrete enough. But I think, and for me, you know, what's the whole purpose of this talk is to just show that this is the role of AI ethics. This is the role of AI ethics, is to unpack what these building blocks would be. What is it that would empower us to act free from manipulation while we are interacting with this technology? What is it that would be needed to do that? So yeah, it's not, you know, can't give all the, I don't know, you know, what is the level of grain size that we would need to make all of this work? But that's part of the research that we need to do in AI ethics to determine this.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can move over to, I see Dotsie. Let me unmute you so you can ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate and Kathleen, and thank you, Emma, for your presentation. Beautiful one. Now, my questions concerned questions from the philosophical perspective. One, you asked the question, why AI ethics, and how do we relate AI ethics in relation to human ethics? I keep thinking the confusion between AI ethics and human ethics in terms of they trying to complement each other has to do with the whole idea of why AI. So if we're able to answer the question, why AI, then we could find a middle point between human ethics and AI ethics. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when you want to answer the question, why AI, then what comes to mind is the same Aristotelian idea that we want to avoid, human flourishing. And I think when it comes to human flourishing, we also have the issue of agency and capacity. So if we need to reconceptualize the idea of human flourishing, then we can build an AI ethics that makes sure that human flourishing is not selective. Human flourishing is a global human flourishing, not a segregational human flourishing. Then we can have an AI ethics that can relate to human ethics. By human ethics, there's no segregation between humanity. And perhaps I'll bring in the idea of the African understanding of Ubuntu as well. So I think my first question is that we need to answer the question, why AI, to the idea of human flourishing. Then we can have a good relationship between AI ethics and human ethics. Thank you.
Totally agree with you, especially in terms of reconceptualizing what human flourishing would mean in the age of AI. And again, it's only AI ethics that can help us consider that. So I totally agree with that. I just want to, in a point of clarification, although I agree with what you say about AI ethics and human ethics, I think what is also behind what I mean there, and maybe this is needed to unpack. I mean, and that's also a whole different conversation because it takes us into value alignment conversations and things. But when we think about governing AI, we're not governing AI, we're governing humans. We're not governing the technology, we're governing the researchers, the designers, the developers, the deployers, the users of AI technology. Is in any way wrong? I penalize my students if they talk about AI. But AI technology, this is what we're talking about. It's not governing AI. What is, I mean, we can have deep philosophical conversations from John McCarthy onwards, if we want to have those kinds of conversations. But it's the technology and the way in which we are the impact of the technology that is somehow that we need to govern. So what comes into being when we mediate our world with this technology? But in the end, it is humans that take those decisions. So I agree. And yes, to ask why AI? Why do we want? We have, I mean, AI technology is here, and as I said, it has all these huge promises for benefit. But we have to make sure that the benefit is not selective, as you said, and also that the benefit is not somehow a manipulated benefit, a deceptive benefit, based maybe on a fear of missing out rather than anything else. So thank you very much for those comments. I find synergy with what you say. Thanks.
Great. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I'll move over to Kamala first.
Faster, yeah.
I'll unmute you, Kamala, for your question.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much again for your wonderful talk, and also to sort of build the bridge between policy and ethics that I think is a very important contribution. So I have two questions. The first one being, going back to this idea that decision-making is at the core of human agency, I would like to know your thoughts on what will be the special considerations when we design safeguards for the agency of people with, or humans with evolving capacities like children and people with special needs. Because of course they don't have total control over their own decision making, and we have seen that, for instance, in limited capacity and so on in the law. And then my other question, going back to you sort of highlighted the role of the OECD as an important framework, and I would like to know why the OECD AI principles you consider are an important enabler for policy, considering the plethora of frameworks out there. That would be my two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I was waiting for somebody, because this is the problem. The minute that we dare to speak of dignity and of dignified lives, and then we have to immediately consider who we exclude. And it doesn't matter which way you turn, you're either too inclusive or you're too exclusive. And so this is something that will need a lot of refinement, also in the same way that Caitlin's question means that one will have to refine the building blocks even more concretely. Because yes, we do want, I would say at best, for now, my response would be that in the case of, for instance, children, we would then want guardians of children that are not manipulated in some way when they take the decisions. It sounds like a really lame answer, but I can't come up with anything more elegantly than that at the moment. And then in terms of the OECD, the thing is with the OECD, you know, at the beginning of their work on AI, I think they were also, you know, maybe at some stages guilty of only moving on the abstract, but one certainly cannot say that now. If you go to the OECD website and you see the different tools that are available and the different kinds of information that are available to help us to concretize the principles of 2019, and also the fact that they have now they have revised the definition of artificial intelligence. So they are very much focused on trying to keep it as concrete as possible and as actionable as possible. And that is the reason why also in terms of the UNESCO recommendation, I feel the same way. It's the only standard on AI ethics that in fact bothered to go into a lot of detail in terms of policy areas and policy actions to unpack what it would mean to comply with this recommendation. And they followed up with various tools like the readiness assessment and so on. So I think those are the things that are important, and that is why we need ethics.
Great, thanks. I think Christoph, do you have something you wanted to comment on here?
Yes, I'm trying to be brief since this might also be a longer conversation. But you mentioned or you highlight in particular the dangers that come from the private sector, as I understand, the dangers to governance. And I would just like to recommend also not losing sight of government possibilities of infringing on rights, on freedom of expression. I mean, there are at the moment some very worrying developments underway in various parts of the world without going into the details here. But I mean, I think this is also something where people start having less confidence in their governments than they used to have about, well, respecting their rights.
Okay, thank you. I think that's really important. So, and I'll really take care when I write this up, because it's not saying that governments don't have this responsibility. It's about saying that governments alone cannot do what is needed. But you are very, very right, because governments themselves are researchers and designers and developers and deployers and users of AI technology. And the way in which they interact with this technology, definitely and certainly, I mean, you know where I'm situated. I mean, these concerns also touch me in very personal ways. So, yeah, thank you for that point of that warning. Thanks.
Yeah, good clarification. I have a few questions in the chat, and we'll try to get, I know we only have a few minutes left, but hopefully we can get to a few of them. So Stella writes, thank you so much for the amazing presentation. Could you please elaborate more on the term applied, normative, and meta ethics, which you said you could elaborate on if we like, and let us know where you think that AI ethics starts in the whole AI life cycle or design process. Okay.
The first one is a very interesting conversation. And again, you know, something that we need a day for. I just think that, you know, people, I'm concerned as also a head of Department of Philosophy about how people interpret what applied ethics is. And I don't want AI ethics to be just viewed as, oh, okay, this is how we like apply philosophical ideas to the real world, because then we end up with the what of AI ethics. I think it's very much also about what kinds of guidelines, so normative, what kinds of guidelines do we want to have in place to help us navigate this life with AI technology? But also then thinking about what are these guidelines? What is an ethical value? So are ethical values true necessarily? And is there a unique set of these values, and that's meta ethics? I think AI ethics is much more than what people think it is. And, you know, I'll shut up, but that's, you know, I can say a lot more about that. In terms of where AI ethics starts, it's everywhere. AI ethics is not only in the design phase. I cannot say enough praise of value by design, but it's because it helped take ethics away, the idea of ethics away as an afterthought, as a tick box. You know, okay, I comply with all of this, okay, ethics is done. So it played a huge role there, but it made it sound as if we get everything right in the design phase, we can sit back. And of course not. The deployment, the use, it abounds with ethical problems. So AI ethics is part of innovation. It's part of every stage of the AI life cycle in different ways. But yeah, it's integral. And that's why I say it's an enabler of innovation.
Thanks. In the last few minutes, I'm going to try to combine a few questions I see from Vanessa, NB, and Kia. And several of them touch on something I also find interesting. So mentioning there's a lot of guidelines, rules, and so on. And I would be interested to know why you think the UNESCO and OECD principles differ, if you could comment on that quickly. But I guess they're asking, you know, what's the right action plan to address AI ethics properly, given, you know, this complexity of the situation? And then several of the questions, you know, specifically brought up academia. What can our role be as academics in this mission? And how, you know, what's the biggest misconception around AI ethics right now that maybe academia can help with, or that some of these guidelines can help with? So thank you. I'm trying to combine all your questions. I hope I didn't butcher them.
I'll try and answer in the 1 minute that we have. I think in terms of the OECD and the UNESCO, I've responded to that already a little bit. It is because they are the only entities that, in fact, went to the trouble to try and unpack the principles and values into actions and to develop tools to help implementation of these principles. The IEEE also did. But from a different perspective. But yeah, so that's for me really important, to not just say this, do this, not that, and, you know, sit back, but actually involve themselves in these processes. What is the right plan? This is an interesting question. And there it is. There isn't one right plan. I've just come from a big project on, you know, cultural diversity in AI ethics. And the finding is, and there's also a very, very interesting study being done at the moment at the Academy of Science in Austria, and the report will be launched in June. The findings show that the differences, the importance of finding the right way in which to concretize AI ethics comes in the implementation phase. So it isn't necessarily so much, it's in terms of how we articulate different values or the same values differently. Because if you come from collectivist versus an individualist paradigm, you would think differently about what privacy is and how it plays into attaining a life of well-being, but we would agree that privacy, the right to privacy, is an important right. But it is really in the implementation phase that we start seeing the different narratives becoming really, really important. And it's really interesting, but I can't, this is a big topic. But the right plan would just be a plan where the focus is on what is needed for us to attain lives of well-being with this technology in authentic ways, whatever that would mean at that stage. And obviously international law is always the bottom line. Academia, the role of academia is to in fact be involved. I think that so much important work is done within academia. We still don't would speak enough with industry. Industry still doesn't speak enough with us. We still work in our silos, even within our academic little nests. Here I sit on the 20th floor in a high-rise building, literally in an ivory tower. I don't have time to go down to the computer science people. They're somewhere on the ground, very, interestingly, if you think in terms of metaphors, but they're concretely on the ground and I'm floating somewhere in the air. And that should not be the case. But academia is exceptionally important. The problem is the funding, because the funding, where does the funding for what we do come from? But I can say a lot more about that, but certainly we have a very important role. The biggest misconception is that AI ethics is an obstacle to governance, an obstacle to innovation. This is hype. This is talk that fits the private sector. We have to wake up and we have to take care that we explain what AI ethics is and that we practice it in ways that show this hype for what it is, and really put our money where our mouths are, as far as that is concerned, because that's our biggest enemy, is to downplay what the role of AI ethics is, in fact.
Thank you so much.
Highly agree. Go ahead, Christoph.
Thank you so much, and much of this resonates very much with me. Also, especially what you said about the danger of box ticking, because I have a worry that this is going in that direction and a lot of AI ethics might get lost. Hopefully not. Well, thank you so much again. And thanks also to all our commenters in the audience and everyone for joining us and contributing to the discussion. Stay tuned for exciting talks to come, where we will continue to welcome distinguished guest speakers. Our next speaker series will be at the TUM Think Tank in person on May 16th, 11 a.m. The topic Accountability as a Value and Principle in AI Between Ethics and Law by Jose Antonio Santos, Professor of Legal Philosophy at Rey Juan Carlos University, Madrid. So thank you so much, Emma, again.
Thank you much. Thank you for having me and all the comments. Thank you.